Today's businesses are on a vigilant watch for threats in an ongoing cyber war. It's time to get real-world solutions to protect and secure your valuable business information anytime, anywhere.
Well, welcome to the show. In this episode, we sit down with Richa Kaul, CEO and founder of Compliance. She's a respected GRC leader, privacy specialist, and former chief strategist, known for her ability to translate complex regulatory environments into practical, scalable programs. With deep experience across compliance, privacy, and enterprise governance, she brings a rare blend of strategic insight and operational clarity. On this episode, we're going to explore how agentic workflows and intelligent automation are reshaping the future of enterprise GRC, from real-time risk monitoring to adaptive compliance operations. She breaks down where organizations are struggling today, what the evolution of GRC programs will look like, and how AI-driven agents can streamline evidence collection, reduce manual overhead, and improve audit readiness. She also shares her perspective from time as a chief strategist, offering a behind-the-scenes look at how leadership teams can position compliance as a business enabler rather than a bottleneck. Packed with expert insights and forward-looking ideas, this episode is going to open up a lot of different discussions about this world, and we're so proud to have her on the show, and welcome to the show. We're so glad to have you.
Thanks so much, Joshua. It's a pleasure to be here. What a kind introduction. And I'm really looking forward to talking about it for GRC.
Yeah. Well, Richa, can you kind of go over kind of your background? I know I probably just barely touched it, and this is a subject I am very much interested in. GRC work, for the longest time, has been very complicated and cumbersome, and you're sending spreadsheets, and it just is a miserable field several years ago, but I just see it's really exploding, and y'all are tackling it. So did I miss anything on your background?
You know, you captured all of the professional side of things, but maybe the most important part of my background, Joshua, is what's not in my resume, which is that I'm a huge data privacy nut. I am very against companies or governments having more of my data than they actually need. And that is actually the seed for growing this business. You know, I got to a point, I'm really like at holiday parties telling my friends and family how to improve their security configurations and turn off mic access on their apps. You know, that's the level of data privacy nut that I am and was.
Mm.
And I think it got to a point where I realized that no matter how much I, think about and care about my personal security configurations, at the end of the day, it is most efficient to actually help secure the businesses who hold the world's data, because that is where the risks actually come from to all of us. We can't live as hermits, especially in 2025, 2026 soon. We can't live as hermits. We've got to, trust companies with our data. And for me and for us as a business, it's all about helping those companies better protect consumers. And so that is the why in compliance with the why.
Well, it's exciting. I always wondered why, in many cases, they would capture private information that's not even necessary. Like they would capture social security numbers for some reason, and nobody knew. Well, it was easier in case we needed to look somebody up, and it's great to have their social, but there was no real intent and understanding of privacy for the longest time. And now it's nothing, everything is data. Your profile, all your value is data. So how do you go about tackling GRC in the first place for a company? Like when they say, look, I'm struggling, I need to be able to do GRC better, quicker, faster. What do you see normally as some of the pain points they're having before they reach out to you?
Yeah. So the number one pain point folks have is they come and tell us, look, we have this expanding risk surface and so much complexity. We all know it. There's just so much increase in threats that are happening in our environments today. Anthropic just posted a couple weeks ago that they experienced their first data breach completely through autonomous AI agents. That's the scary stuff that CISOs and GRC teams are dealing with every day. And that type of risk, it requires such a level of coverage and risk reduction, risk mitigation that is almost impossible for humans to be able to do now. And so folks usually come to us and say, look, we have so much that we need to do. There's so much that we want to do. We have all these strategic priorities, but what we don't really have is the time or the resources to possibly capture all of that. So how do you actually deal with that? And so what we have basically done is created AI agents that do a lot of the manual work, a lot of the repetitive work for our clients. And it not only reduces the time that they need to spend, but it actually allows them to have greater risk visibility. And I'm happy to talk through that more, but that's been the high level pitch.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. I think one of the most cumbersome things I ran into in cybersecurity was pulling audit data for everything that came up. The auditors would come into Wells Fargo, where I was with Ernst & Young, and it would ask for log on IDs, logs of this activity on these applications. And we just spend so much time gathering information that it took somebody completely offline, essentially. And then I remember E&Y doing these projects, and we would do GRC assessments, and the versionings going back and forth. And what was the spreadsheet for? It was just, everybody hated these audits because you were using Microsoft Excel and you were pasting data into columns. And it just seems that that is not the future. The ability to take that data, present it in a manner where you can make some business decisions. That's really what you want to do. But you spend so much time just trying to put it all together and track it. I take it that's kind of your whole problem set. That's what you're trying to solve, huh?
Exactly right. And so we consider automation of evidence to be almost table stakes these days, and we've taken it a couple steps further. So we not only allow for complete automation of evidence items, which like no one needs to be taking screenshots anymore. Again, it's 2025, soon 2026. But I think from our perspective, what matters is that we've also built AI agents that then review the evidence for you and automatically flag gaps. We've actually partnered with auditors to co-build those agents with domain expertise built in. So it's like you have a continuous auditor reviewing your work before you actually go into your audit. And that is the next level of growth that we've actually been seeing our clients take advantage of, which is pretty cool. We also have things like AI that cross maps all your evidence automatically to your various requirements. So now rather than collecting the same evidence multiple times, you collect once, map once, and now you're compliant many. And that's the way that we've approached the entire product.
No, that's great, because I think that's the most cumbersome part of it all, is just the data collection and management and seeing historical trends. And was that service account actually there a year ago? Oh, I don't know. Go look through Excel spreadsheets trying to find out. So definitely. Now, how do you handling the new regulations as they come out? Obviously, there's CMMC. There's several different frameworks that are out there. How does your platform adapt to that? And if a framework changes or updates, how are y'all keeping up with that as well?
Thanks for asking that. Yeah, we have all the latest frameworks in the product. We've built it in a way that we can really easily add them in. It takes us an hour or less. So we actually work with compliance experts and auditors that help us to translate, if needed, those standards into controls, or in the case of NIST or ISO, those just come controls off the shelf. And so we bring those into the platform very easily. Essentially, then they are available. When it comes to updating, it's a good example from NIST CSF recently went from 1.1 to 2.0. We easily built a crosswalk in our environment, and we helped all of our clients move over seamlessly from 1.1 to 2, because we laid out, the additional requirements where their existing evidence would map to the new clauses and controls, and it was a pretty seamless process.
Okay, yeah, that's good. I always saw where companies would struggle with something would get revved and they're like, well, what's the gap between this one and this one? And just not having those answers made it always difficult for the business, right?
I know. And just to think that now we don't have to spend any time on that. We can focus on actually addressing the risk, which is the real goal of a GRC team. It's not about, a new standard has come out. How do I individually map my evidence from previous requirement to new requirement? I think that's should be in the past. I think now we need GRC people to focus on strategic risk, and we need to leave some of that manual work to tech.
That's a good point there. I think in some cases, GRC is seen as like this legal compliance type thing, but not risk management. It's like, okay, I need to do these frameworks, but it's just because the auditors want it or this. They don't really see it in some cases as risk reduction. But I think that's a good point you had, is that you need to view it in the manner of how, GRC is how do I manage, identify, and mitigate risk, not just how do I respond to an audit that somebody came into so I can make them go away.
Exactly. I think a lot of clients come to us and say, I'm sick of being reactive. I really wish that we could be proactive, but it feels so difficult when you're mired in all of that manual work and your month to month work schedule is based on what audits you have coming up. It feels almost impossible to move to a more proactive state. And it may take a few months, but we have very much helped clients go from that reactive to the proactive and actually being in control. And as you know, Joshua, so much of it is also that peace of mind that you get from being in control rather than just running and chasing audit evidence and being behind on a million things at once. It is a meaningful difference to those individuals.
Yeah, and I bet it's less staff to run a GRC program if you have the right platform. If everything's manual, but you're supplementing that with 4 and 5 auditors versus maybe 3 auditors in a platform, that seems to be the future. I know in the virtual CISO side of that, there's this platform called Sonomi that we use for different collection of risk and controls. But you can see where everybody wants to move to do some virtual CISO deployment using something like that. It's real seamless to assign multiple controls to other team members. It used to be you would only assign it to one person in that security department. Their job was to go ask 5, 6 people and fill out that spreadsheet. So their job was just a spreadsheet filler. So I think where you can assign different people, they can collaborate dynamically on it. I think that's the future because the risks just get too big to manage in its time period, and having something to do that dynamically makes sense.
Yeah, I know. And it's so funny. Those people who are, spreadsheet fillers, as you said, they don't want
Mhm.
that. No one joins the workforce hoping to fill in spreadsheets every day. And I think a little
Mhm.
bit of this transition to AI that I see is actually providing value to the very people who don't want to be doing those things anymore and freeing them up, just like relieving that manual work to the AI and allowing
Yeah.
them to actually do strategic, high value, high strategy type of work, which is, again, probably why they joined GRC in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people spend so much time doing the actual audits and everything that's on the audit calendar for the year that they don't think about driving other strategic items forward because, yeah, you're buried with mundane work. When you're doing assessments and you got to synthesize that and then work with other team members in IT and security, did that really get remediated? And then having the knowledge to know that what they did actually should mitigate that control here. It's really hard when you're kind of an audit focused person to understand intense engineering that goes around something, but it seems to be the basis. You want to have the good GRC program.
Yes. I've also heard from some of our clients. Again, we support some of the biggest enterprises in the world to also some mid-market companies. And what we've heard them say to us recently is that they have been able to have more time back to focus on things like building a compliance culture. And that really warmed my heart, to be honest, Joshua, because that's the whole vision for the company is that if you can
Right?
give GRC folks some time back, they can actually move the needle on things that are going to be better for the business overall rather than spending their time filling out a evidence request from an auditor. It's actually about saying how can they improve the culture of compliance, the culture of security in their organization, which is where, as we know, the breaches often usually come from. Someone answering a phishing email or someone having access longer than they should or a third party risk. It's like we need to focus on actually being more mindful of those risks and thinking less about chasing evidence for an audit.
No, I think that's a great way to look at it and to shift that. Yeah, the same way we had admins that would join meetings and take notes. And I
Yep.
do incident response, right? So companies get broken into, I get called. How do we mitigate this? How do we contain this? How do we drive things forward? It's in a real quick process that in many ways you need an admin to take notes because I hate trying to listen to what they're saying and trying to write a very cryptic note to remember what they were saying. I rather just focus all my attention on what they're saying, knowing that my AI agent is listening, is going to summarize all the notes. I'm not going to miss that level of context. And I could just concentrate in being in the moment and figuring out what they're talking about. And to me, it has allowed me to just be much more efficient because I don't have to worry about they said this URL, this said this IP address. Let me try and write it down. I know it's being recorded. I know it's going to be summarized. I can go back to it, but I can concentrate on what the ideas that they're talking about. And I used to come back and look at my notes and it was like terrible. I don't really understand what happened. So I do think that tools like that can take that mundane away from you and let you concentrate onto the strategic makes a whole lot of sense. And I do like where, and I'm not sure if your product does this or not, but I'm sure it's natural language processing. So if you want to know if you're at risk at something, we want to be able to ask the model or the agent just directly, am I at risk of this? Rather than just keyword searches for different terms and spreadsheets. It just became where management couldn't make business decisions without pulling a security engineer to interpret it. And that to me is where it breaks down. It should be consumable by the business. They understand it enough. And it's just abstracted some of the technical stuff. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes complete sense. And I think that whole keyword search era is now long gone. I hope at least. I know some other tools in our space still are of that era. But I think
Yeah.
from our perspective, it's actually more human. Like I think when we're talking about an agentic platform that we have, it almost feels like you have other team members that are doing this work. I don't usually like that comparison and that kind of metaphor because I think that it takes away from the human judgment that's needed. And so I just want to say I am a believer that human judgment and human in the loop is required for GRC to be successful, very clearly. I think that what's not required, though, is for humans to do manual work that they don't like to do. And so what we see is that the agents basically take over, again, that manual work, and they do it in a qualitative way that respects the nuance and the spirit of compliance. And it's not like a blunt instrument, like keyword search is how I think of like a blunt instrument. It's precision tooling. And I think in order to have trust in your product, doing that first level work that you were previously doing yourself, it needs to be a precision tool. Otherwise, you kind of are just redoing the work that the tech is doing, and that's like even more of a waste of time. And so we have really tested it on that, and we have almost zero hallucination. We actually have never had a client complain about hallucination. I would just say almost zero because you never want to be
Right.
100%, but we've
Right.
never had an issue with that. We have extremely reliable results, and we've seen that after a month of working with our tech, clients actually trust it fully, which is a pretty quick turnaround.
Yeah, and I would love to be able to use GRC platforms during an incident. Like when you
Yeah.
get pulled in, there's an incident, there's a breach. I don't know what assets are where, especially when you get pulled as a third party or even internally. And I could see where, okay, we have a security incident in this data center with these servers. Can I look up the security plans and the risk controls in that area? I mean, when I was at Wells Fargo, we had a system called Spark, and it would create security plans for every asset. Every server had a security plan, infrastructure had a security plan, the data center had a security plan. And our jobs at that time, I had like 28 people, was to go through and make sure each of these assets had pen testing done, had its code review, had everything it needed to maintain the security of that platform moving forward. And so you can see if there was an incident, the first thing we'd want to go do is go look into the Spark systems. And when was the last time it was pen tested? Where's the vulnerability assessment? What business lines are using this? What's its criticality? All this stuff where I never had that context before. Before it was just a server, it was an IP address, and it was in a data center. How it fit into the business and its overall risk posture, incident response guys don't know. It's rare we get told that. So I'd love it where we do have an incident and I have a GRC agent and I can ask it. We have these assets here. Tell me what the security plans that cover these. What are the controls? What do I need to know? The same way past incidents, we would come in and there was a ransomware attack, and in the middle of it, they're like, same thing happened 6 months ago. Okay, so what happened 6 months ago? All very relevant. IOCs, the data elements that they were using, all very relevant, but nobody remembers it. Nobody really wrote it down in a full incident response document. So it's just very hard to take past security incidents, GRC controls and things that are happening, and understand my assets. I don't know. Does that make sense? I would love that panacea where GRC was part of the incident response team.
100%. And I think, it has to be on both sides of the incident, actually, because it's about,
Mhm.
first that controls monitoring that's able to flag, again, proactively those gaps that could lead to an incident, which to me, I mean, actually having the incident response team and incident response folks come in and say, hey, these are the 15 things I want to monitor. And then knowing that your GRC team can continuously monitor them and use AI to actually do qualitative analysis on them. I mean, that is kind of a dream. That's where the partnership should be. And then, of
Mm.
course, if an incident is to occur, being able to have, again, reliable partners on the GRC team to say, how can we quickly not only mitigate, what's happened, also like isolate it, and how can we also think about the learnings from this that should create potential risks that we can monitor, more controls that we can monitor. Like that's the ideal partnership.
Yeah, absolutely. I was over at Bristol Myers Squibb. I was running the security operations center for about 2 years. One of the things they had was like lab machines that were responsible for very specific testing of medicines and trials. So if anything changed on it, if it was hit by a cyber attack or somebody updated something, it just would invalidate some of the findings of that machine because it needed to make sure it was certified and it was operable and so forth. So you can see there's probably other organizations that have that kind of criticality of how do you have controls around it. This is what you're supposed to do because there's regulations the business requires on it. And to me, that all came through GRC. Somebody in GRC has got to tell me what risks exist and what controls and kind of working together for it. That's why I get excited about GRC programs, because in many ways it helps me do my technical job much better when there's this coordination between the two.
100% agree with that. And I think that's where I feel like GRC can become that business enabler and
Yeah.
reduce the cost of so many other things like an incident response, or we can just be more proactive as well as, again, take learnings from it. There's just so much value in the risk reduction and cost saving, time saving that comes from something like that.
Yeah, and I could say one, I'm on an investigation now in which a law firm and an accounting firm got hit with a fraud. So essentially they had stolen their username and password for a banking system, which were able to put ACH transactions in. When they stole those credentials or bought them from an initial access broker, they also had the phone number of the person in that department who was responsible for release. And they called them and said, hey, we have a fraudulent wire for $18,000 here. And is this approved? Do you want us to stop this? I was like, absolutely not. I want you to stop that. And the phone number came across, had the caller ID. It said it was the bank in question as well. She said, okay, let me, you need to give me the MFA code that's going to your phone so I can stop that transaction. Oh, okay. Well, yeah, here's the code to verify me to stop the transaction. Well, that was to initiate the transaction. And of course, they set up a meeting with them to review it in 2 days. Well, enough time for the money to leave the account, and it was a significant loss. And it was all due to a process breakdown that will never ask for a code. You shouldn't put them in this way. If somebody calls you and tells you that something hit the account, go to the portal yourself. Don't click on email. So there was these best practices that go along with that. And you can see where there's 4 people that are doing these wire transfers for this company. And so you need all 4 to do it the same way. And you can't technically enforce it because you don't have the software to do that, but you need it procedurally for everybody to follow. That's really hard, I think. Even in the GRC world, you could come up with a control and say, does everybody follow this? But how do you really know if all 4 people would respond to a text message, would violate the process, and it'd break down and they'd lose money again? I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes complete sense. But I think there's 2 pieces of that. I think one is it goes back to what I was saying before, where if you have the GRC team with capacity, you can actually build a culture of compliance that they can spend their time doing that and making sure that people across the business are more aware of the latest type of tactics that these bad actors are using. And so I do think a piece of it is like, if our biggest threat and our biggest real risk exposure is our people, which is just naturally going to happen, especially these bad actors are getting really savvy. And as you said, calling them directly and, being able to really believably pretend like they are the people we think that they are, then it has to be a level of vigilance internally that can only be created from like human to human training and interaction and awareness, not so much just people behind a computer. And if the agents and the tech are doing some of this work, then the GRC team is free to be actually sharing some of that information and doing that. So that's kind of one piece of it. I think the other side of it is we are never, like, I don't like to breach shame, as they say in our space, because at the end of the day, like, we're never going to be able to completely get rid of breaches. And that's not even the goal. I think the goal is saying, how can we better equip ourselves to at least respond to them quickly, have things in place so that, the effects of those are not overly impactful to the org. I'll just give a very silly example. That whole AWS outage that happened, like the
Yeah.
US
Eastern Seaboard. Yeah.
Exactly. We obviously, we're a compliance tech company, so we have a lot of good practices in place, good controls in place. But I realized that morning that I tried to message my management team to be like, look, is production down? Like, what's happening? Immediately when I heard, and Slack was down because obviously it's impacting Slack as well. And we do have controls in place that say communication must be multi avenues in case something happens, like we have continuity. But a couple new people had joined the management team. I didn't have their phone numbers. And so all of a sudden I was only texting a few of the people on the management team as my backup to Slack. And I realized like I don't have a separate control that says like do I actually have everyone's phone numbers in case something like this happens? Like simple things like that seem so small, but can make all the difference. Luckily, we weren't down and production wasn't affected. But if it was, what if I didn't have the number of my engineering manager and I couldn't reach out to him via Slack? How are we going to communicate? So
Yeah.
it sounds kind of silly, but little things like that go such a long way. And just making sure that you're actually prepped for and then can respond quickly to anything that happens.
And the good thing about banking, so I was a CISO for Whitney Bank down in New Orleans for about 7 years. They had to have exactly who was the backup because it's disaster recovery. And there was so many regulations to make sure we provided banking services and we provide money to our customers, even during a hurricane. And so they would know what personnel goes here or there. But they spent a ton of money doing that because regulations and the OCC and they said that you have to have these processes. We're going to audit you. You got to be able to fall back and have an emergency data center. This is really before we had ESXi and you can do snapshots and vMotions virtual machines. This is when you're mainframe and some servers. So it really became important to have those backup processes. But other organizations, like you say, they don't think in that manner until something completely went down. And I remember when AWS went down because I was prepping for the Marine Corps' birthday, the 250th birthday, and I was throwing a party, and I used Eventbrite. And I had like 32 people were in Eventbrite, and it was down. And I had to add more tickets because of it. That site was down. It just made a whole mess. I had to change the location of it. I couldn't do that because the whole site was down. And it really impacted a lot of things I didn't know that was tied into AWS. You could see many of these down direct detector or whatever that website is and shows the outages. And I've done so many security assessments when they say, well, we don't have to worry about it. It's Amazon. They're not going to go down. They're like 99999, right? And so everyone was like, we don't need to have a disaster recovery if Amazon goes down. If they go down, everybody's busted anyway. Well, now they're seeing, yeah, they need to have a disaster recovery capability. Right? So
I've said the same before, and I was eating my words that morning when Amazon did go down, and all of a sudden we were like, "Oh my goodness, what?" Yeah, it's crazy. It's actually crazy.
Yeah, and I see when it comes to the GRC world, I'd love to have an agent that is like a GRC agent that if we're going to do an audit and they have questions or whatever, the agent just pings me and goes, "Hey, Josh, what about this? What about that?" And ask questions. And it could be at 9 o'clock at night when I'm online, it sees me working and I can answer these instead of flagging emails and having to go back and fill out spreadsheets and respond to auditors and track my responses, which is horrible. I would love for the agent just to ask me or the auditor just to ask the agent. And we already have RAG that's built in, so they already know what our data is like and they can respond. Even with junior incident response or engineers, when we go into a company, and we have a new guy join, it takes this about 60% impact to the senior guy because the senior person's got to now shepherd this junior person who doesn't know where the bathroom is, so to speak, and doesn't know how to operate like we're supposed to. And the solution to that was always, let's create a Word document and let's tell everybody this is what you do. I don't know. I think that's horrible. It just always impacted me and the senior guys so much. We couldn't scale at that level. And it took me 4 or 5 months for that junior person just to come up where they were really effective and they plugged in well. I would love it to say, hey, this is my GRC agent. I'm going to authorize it to talk to the 2 guys we just hired and answer any questions they have, except for obviously payroll and salary and any of that stuff. So we need guardrails for that. But anything operational, here's our documents, any questions. I just think it would make them so much more efficient than going through a week-long onboarding. Here's some documents. Oh, don't worry about that link. We moved to AltiPro. It's a new system. So there's a new HR system. Don't worry about that. That seems to be such a cumbersome process. That sounds like that you really need to be able to solve that with a GRC type solution, not an HR. I don't know. Does that make sense? A GRC solution sounds like it would do a better job than a onboarding agent.
Absolutely. I actually, by the way, we basically built that. And now we're currently integrating with Slack and Microsoft Teams so that it can actually chat with people instead of being over email or in the product itself. But yeah, we've built that. So we have RAG infrastructure built in for all of our agents to have a specific context. And we've built the guardrails around what we consider confidential or sensitive information to be excluded. So we're quite a ways along that. And in Q1, we'll be releasing it into Slack so that we'll be able to have agent communication directly with the team. and it'll be based on your user role. So it communicates differently with the GRC admin than it does with the control owner and so on. So yeah, those are the types of exciting things that we're doing right now. We're trying to rechart what enterprise GRC actually looks like.
No, that's fascinating. I like that. I have some security engagements where I have some clients are asking for an AI roadmap, like assessment, current state, future state roadmap. And so what I've been looking at doing, and me and a couple guys, it's doing that first level of assessment of usability, for instance, acceptable usage policy. Who's using what open models? Are you allowed to take our data? There's just this general body of policy that needs to be built, governance structure where it's like you're meeting monthly or quarterly for your customers. You're helping them drive not just getting policy and making decisions, but driving awareness and training through this kind of office hours, webinar type function that drives it for the year. But I also saw where the next level of that is the AI risk assessment. What systems are you using? How are you using it, and so forth? And that's a whole level thing, like GRC using an agentic approach towards that as a system for risk management. What's the next one? Security monitoring for Microsoft. We're going to use these Copilot agents to do that. That sits into that workflow bucket that you need risk management around. And so it's just kind of understanding how having a acceptable usage policy all the way to the far right where you're having agent workflows. See, because I think some of our customers are at the point of just they use ChatGPT or Claude or Anthropic, any of these products for productivity, but they would love to see it used corporately, internally for things, but they really don't. Those are solutions they have to buy and people they have to spend money on, where you have the productivity stuff in the front, they feel they're trying to leverage there. And then there's this panacea of, agent workflow. I want to be able to use an agentic support for that. And then, but how do I even get there? I don't even have acceptable usage policy. So you kind of go, I need acceptable usage policy. I need to put a risk framework and architecture together that says, where's my data? What's my quality? How do I actually use this? And then it's like, how do I use it to actually accomplish business? Because I think some of them say, let me just get an agent, but they never figure step one and step two, you needed acceptable usage. You need to be able to put a program together. And then you need risk management and actual infrastructure security controls. And then go using AI agents to do a number of different production workflows.
Yep.
That's where I was kind of thinking.
100%. I think, Joshua, the reason that we feel that it has to be sequential in that way, which, I mean, of course it does in many cases, but part of the reason is because I think a lot of enterprise SaaS softwares are not necessarily taking ownership of their full responsibility to deliver privacy first and secure tools. I think too often, you kind of mentioned earlier in the conversation about companies that are asking for your social security number when they don't need it, right? And that level of like responsibility and what I call like the duty of care, I think seems to be absent too often in SaaS companies and in their leadership as they're thinking of rolling out products to enterprises. And I mean, again, maybe it's because I'm a data privacy nut, I don't know, but I just take that responsibility so seriously. And everybody on our team does. And so when we come to an enterprise client, we're delivering AI agents right now for GRC to Fortune 500 clients. And when they take a peek behind the first layer to understand our privacy and security, we typically hear them say, we wish all of our vendors worked like this, because we are so particular about making sure that we eat our own dog food and actually have good security controls in place, not only internally, but for our product, and most importantly for our clients to be able to trust from. And I think that goes a long way. And it's a shame, actually, that in today's world, you have to scrutinize your vendors so much. You absolutely should, but it's because of the fact that the standards just feel low. They feel low for vendors right now. And I think we've got a long way to go. I'm not talking about compliance standards because, yes, you can get your SOC 2 and whatever, but are you really living what you're saying? Compliance is not security, as we know. And so I think, the idea of compliance with the why is that you're addressing the reasons behind compliance, not just the check the box.
No, I think that's an important way to look at it, especially if you came from like a big organization where we just always did it this way. There is a level of creativity you're going to need, or you're going to drown in this. This world is just too complicated, and GRC is becoming too complicated. So it makes sense to have those kind of, and I do see where there's other agentic workflows are going to have GRC oversight of, whether it's your solution uses agentic workflows, right? But what if the company you're using your platform for has a number of agents, and now you got to put governance around them? and say that they should only have access to this data, they should only know this. How do I manage all that? That's one thing from an HR perspective. If you ask the VP, which people should know about the layoffs you have coming up and which ones should know about this, it's almost the same thing as how do you manage multiple agents running around through IT and through another third party? Because one of the biggest risks we see is third party risk management, because it's even getting into fourth party risk. I mean, when I was at Wells or even at Whitney Bank, at Booz Allen, you'd have one vendor to another vendor to another vendor. So your third party had, in some cases, all the way down to a fifth party risk from the infrastructure and so forth. So it really gets difficult to say, okay, in that whole workflow, where is AI being used? Where is it in line to my workflow? And I think it's important to understand that I think it's going to make third party risk management a lot more dangerous, having AI in the middle of these, because it's now, it used to be technology just gathered data and did queries in order to present actionable information to a human to make a decision. Now, if you take the human out of the loop, so we were talking about how important it is, you could have things processed and it just goes nowhere. I had an interview, for instance, this one position, and they're telling you have to interview with this bot first. And so it has this agent call you. And it was the most cumbersome thing in the world to try and talk to the agent. And you would give an answer and they would cut you off halfway. Like you had a time limit, I guess, to say this. And it was just a terrible experience being interviewed by this agent. Now, I know things will get better in the future and so forth, but is that agent making determinations whether that you should get the job or not? Oh, that's pretty bad. I would really want to put some governance to determine if the agent's determining who gets hired and who doesn't. So I think it's a brave new world.
It is indeed. I think that there's a lot of practices that tech leaders, tech founders can put into place to actually address some of those concerns. And I hope to see more and more, again, responsibility being taken to make sure that good, high value, high security, privacy first products are coming out into the world, rather than everyone just kind of going the easiest path. But I guess that's one woman's dream.
Yeah. And I think the whole days of SharePoint, where you have this static website and a bunch of documents that are uploaded, and I think that's going to go away from like an internet perspective. We used to just say, we're going to build this internet and we're going to put all SharePoint, all this data behind it. If you need anything, search through it. These things are old. They're not updated. Nobody takes it. I've never seen a company take SharePoint seriously the way it should be in an organization. So what you would think, hey, let's deploy SharePoint and everybody uploads data the same way. And you got old stuff. It's just not as efficient. And I could see where using agentic workflows, especially if you have a GRC function and you just say, hey, just monitor this folder here because the business process, people keep uploading these folders or these documents within this folder. It would be nice to just tell the agent, watch all this process when it's coming up and look for these things. And then when I go to the GRC control, it says, yeah, it's been updated. It's been updating every month out of this folder. And we notice the documents are taking different language now. Or it would be interesting just to have the agent be able to do that. Like one of the most cumbersome things for me is when we have a SOW come in and you get some big contract from a company and their lawyers redlined it all up. And you're like, well, what's different between that and the 3 other versions they sent? And now me as a security engineer is trying to understand legal language. And I like the ability to just say, this is kind of my contract standard. This is kind of the risk I'm willing to accept, which is ones I'm not. Go ahead and give me a first pass at those 2. Go look at both documents and give me some analysis of what it is and what's the risk. And I think that will speed up business. I think tool sets using AI that help with product documentation. Like I had a page that had all my services and so forth when I was at another company. And we had to send it to the marketing department. And it took 5 weeks to get through a marketing department. And it was just 2 pages long. It was just a sales slick. It was 2 pages long. And just going through all that was completely cumbersome. I would love a dynamic way of doing that, driven by GRC, not by the SOC. Too many people think you drive cybersecurity in a company by the Security Operations Center and what are you monitoring? And I think that's wrong. I think you drive it by the GRC function. And you use the SOCs and all SOC services to actually feed the performance of your controls that you're using in that first place. I just find when people do the opposite, like I was at a board report, I was doing a board meeting when I was at E&Y, and they said, what's the most common way to tell if somebody's got a good cybersecurity program or not? And the first thing off the bat, and the CISO wasn't there. He was late. He was coming in. He wasn't there. And I said, well, the first thing is a red flag to me is if you come in and you ask somebody how their program's doing and they just rattle off technology names. Great. I got CrowdStrike. We got this technology here. I got this Splunk for a SIM. And they just name brands because it's obvious they don't know what they're talking about. And it's easy to secure your job by just throwing out IBM's name. Oh, we're IBM AWS shop. And who's going to put you down for that and get a hit on it? And as soon as he did come in, the board was, how's our program doing? And he did exactly that. It was a stunning moment because of all of them just said, he just said this. The guy is naming off products, but not capabilities. I think it ought to all start off with GRC. It starts off with the risks, and this is where your foundation is at. And then everything goes off of that. But too often it's not. GRC is a side function. You're like a business audit function in most companies. You're not at the table with the security operations team. But I think that's where y'all need to be.
I totally agree. And I think that it is, as you said, the most important letter in GRC is the R. It's about risk. And I think that if you have that risk understood and actually written down and you're putting mitigating controls into place, then it's a level of control and peace of mind that people would pay a lot of money for.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I'm glad to see you're tackling that problem head on. And GRC is definitely something warm to my heart because I've had to support so many different GRC functions as a consultant. And I always saw where it can do better. So what do you think is the future coming up? What are we expecting, not just from in your field, but in cyber general? It's 2026 coming up. What are kind of your predictions? So I can play it back later and go, look, she was right.
Look, I think we're heading into the agentification of cybersecurity and of GRC, and I think it's on both sides of the table. I think not only are people going to start using agents to actually, unfortunately, be the bad actors potentially trying to breach a company, but I think you're going to have also agents being responsible for the defense as well. And so I think what you're going to see is a lot more agentic capabilities. However, I think it's going to take a couple years for most enterprises to understand how to use them in a more customized way and use them to their fullest. So I think what you're going to see next year is a bit of frustration between like teams and the AI agents that they're trying to deploy. And I think we're going to have a big learning year in cyber and GRC on what is the capabilities of AI and how important it is to build AI well and use AI well. And I hope that compliance with a Y is going to be, out in front of that and leading the charge on actually creating AI that folks can rely on and that enterprises see as high value. But that is where I think we're going to see some changes in 2026, and I think some challenges as well as benefits in 2026.
Yeah, one question I had that just stalked something is that the AWS outage, right? What happens when your agentic layer goes out? And then everything you were relying on from a workflow management is down.
Yep. I think, honestly, Joshua, my pushback on that is that, look, before, when you think about humans only have so much like literal time and ability to do work. It's almost like, yes, if agents go offline, I mean, of course, you should have backups in place and there should be a host of security controls, making sure that the agent is not doing any harm if it's offline. But it's like, think about when someone just went on a vacation or had a family emergency. Like, yes, functions can go offline, but if you have human in the loop and if you have that human in the loop judgment built in, you shouldn't be completely hamstrung if that happens. It should be a small inconvenience that quickly gets recovered and moved on from. And so I think that's how we need to be thinking about it too. Again, as the responsibility of tech leaders is saying, look, you cannot replace human judgment. Let's not try to replace human judgment. Let's try and figure out how we can enable humans to do more and more and more with less, because that's the kind of world that we're all walking into in the next couple of years.
No, I agree. One of the things that was so cumbersome is I think you can use GPTs to do sentiment analysis on the security mailbox. In these bigger organizations, you would teach people to send things that you think are threats or phishing attacks, and you would send it at security at whatever your company's domain is and everything. But one of the terrible about of that is you couldn't really filter what was real, what was not. Was somebody upset? Was it spam? If you were sending a spam. And so having some sentiment analysis, go through that mailbox and go, this email is important. I think somebody needs to take a look at that, because it was always somebody looking through thousands of emails to try and catch something. I really see AI giving me the output of it. I just want to know what's actionable out of that group of messages.
Exactly.
So I see that happening. So I think it's a brave new world here in the future. I definitely think there is more people trying to understand what is the risks of it, like pen testing AI models using large language models.
Exactly.
You go through the OWASP, you have prompt injection, you got data poisoning, you have all these different things. So just like you do pen testing regulatory wise now for GRC controls, it's coming for AI. It's gonna, there's no way around not having that.
I totally agree with you, Joshua. And I think it's going to be an exciting world, challenging world, certainly a brave new world out there in 2026.
It sure is. So tell me, we're coming towards the end of the show here. How do I get in touch with you? How does our listeners find out more about you, your company, and what it is that y'all do?
Yeah, well, we would welcome you guys to check out our LinkedIn and also our website, compliancewithany.com. So COMPLYANCE.com. And it has so much information about our customer impact, around our AI agents, and the platform that we have built.
Excellent. And so I take it you address at the enterprise and small, medium-sized businesses as well. Sorry.
We focus on enterprise and mid-market. So unfortunately, we don't focus on startups, but mid-market companies, enterprise companies, the second they start to have a couple FTEs on the GRC team, it's a perfect fit.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thanks everybody for tuning in to this episode of Cybersecurity America. Please subscribe, hit that like, comment. You have any questions, we'll respond into it. Tell your friends about it. And I can't wait to see you on the next episode. Everybody stay secure.